Absolutely nothing beats windshield time. Welcome back to Dan the Road Trip Guy, a podcast where we have candid conversations about life lessons learned on the road. I'm your host, Bimmer enthusiast and road trip extraordinaire, Dan Neal. And now, on to the show. Anyway, I'm excited today. I'm on a road trip with a friend of mine, Mike Renner. And Mike and I met, if my mind serves me correctly, in about 2008 on One Lap of America, where Mike was competing and I was putting people on the track. And so I was the last person Mike would see, and we had a good time with that. So I'm just here to chat with Mike. He's on a road trip today, and I'm sitting in a parking lot in Cincinnati, Ohio. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you, Dan. It's always great to see you when I can, and certainly always good to talk with you.
Yeah, same here. And so I like to start these things out, Mike. And of course, some of my guests are like, what are you talking about? And I usually say, well, consider it an elevator pitch, but I put a car spin on it. And so in about 2 minutes or so, and you'll probably go faster, it's a warm-up lap around Mid-Ohio, a track you've been to and I've been to. So tell us, just who is Mike Renner, real quickly?
Well, Mike Renner, first of all, he's a very fortunate guy, like so many people in many ways. I have great family and friends. I live in a great part of the country, and on the car side, I've been able, a number of years ago, I was able to turn my passion into my profession. And, I've loved cars and driving for as long as I can remember. And sometimes I just have to stop and think how fortunate I've been. I mean, to travel and meet people that I normally wouldn't have met, and to drive cars and to be paid to drive some of the cars and do some of the things that I've done. I've just been incredibly fortunate and have had so many good times through the years.
Yeah, you once told me you weren't always in the car business, though, I think.
I've always loved cars, but, I started out years ago. I used to count them up, and now when we do little introductions in our programs, and now I'll just say many, many years ago, I started racing. And, like a lot of people, I had aspirations. I tried to work a deal to go to Europe to do the Formula Renault series, and didn't get too far with that. Just didn't have the funds, didn't work out. And I knew that a number of guys in Formula One ended up there, so I thought probably I'd be the next one,
Yeah.
tongue in cheek.
Exactly.
And so anyway, I kept doing racing and stuff, and thought maybe one day I'll make the big jump, but didn't get too far with that. I was always a little concerned, the practical side, and my father's side said, well, son, you might want to figure out a plan B. I don't see a lot of guys making money racing around sports cars in the U.S. So, I kept racing and things, but I got involved in some businesses in sales and sales management, and then I had my own business, and that took me. I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, which is my hometown. That's where I live now, and I was away for a few years with some business things, and the company, me opening up my own company, took me back to Greenville, and that was about the time that BMW came to town. And then a few years after the factory opened, they were going to build the Performance Center. And I just stopped by. My neighbor was head of communications. Maybe I'm getting ahead of the stories here for you, but he kept saying, you ought to check it out, and I didn't go there looking for a job. I went by just kind of out of curiosity, and some of the key people were there before they opened up, and I'd been driving the brand since the mid 80s, and I'd been racing and taught some people racing, and they said, would you be interested in maybe doing some contract driving? And I did that, and for about 2 years, and then I sold my business to my wife's shock. And BMW said, we'd like for you to be our corporate guy. And I said, look, because I had a business background too. I said, look, I'll be the corporate guy, but I don't want to ride a computer. I want to drive a car, and so we worked out a deal where I get to do both, and it's been really fun for me and an incredible experience.
Yeah, so now you don't have to pay to race, right? You get paid to drive cars.
Yeah, Yeah, honestly, Dan, like I said earlier, a number of times, I thought, and sometimes you do have to keep reminding yourself, but, I've been in places before and I thought, wow, people would pay, if they had the opportunity to do some things I've had, people would pay a gazillion dollars and I'm getting paid to do it. And I don't say that from an egotistical side. I say it truly from a humble, fortunate side.
Yeah, for sure.
It's amazing the way things have worked out.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. So, one of my, this is really a show about road trips and cars and other things too. But so tell me about your first car, very first car you ever had.
Yeah, my first car. So when I was in high school, there were, of course, guys that drove, muscle cars, Mustangs. We had a guy who was a sophomore in high school in a Shelby GT 500, and sophomore in high school. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's a
But
little crazy.
we had guys that drove Porsches, and we had Corvettes, and we had Mustangs, and then we had the guys that drove the sports cars, the TR6s and the MGs. And for whatever reason, it was probably because it was one of the more affordable ones. But a guy in high school, a couple of them had the MG midgets, and I kind of liked those little cars, And I was driving down the road with a buddy of mine, and I spot this British Racing Green MG midget at this import place for sale. It was used, and I went home and told my father about it and said, hey Dan, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I thought I had a good connection. It just dropped away.
Well, it's a road trip, so we're gonna pick up. You went home to talk to your father about it, and
Yeah, yeah. So he was like, well, okay, I guess we can. So Saturday morning, we drive down, get out of the car. We're looking at it. It's sitting there outside the building. And he looks at it. Of course, he knew it was stick to begin with. But he's looking at it. He said, I don't know if this is a car for you. And he said, I hadn't really driven much at that point either. And he said, well, it's stick shift. You can't drive a stick. And I said, yeah, I can. And, my father, one thing I really loved about him, he always gave me some latitude to kind of prove myself. He gave me some rein, if you will, And so I hadn't driven a stick at that point. I had buddies that drove them. I'd watch them drive it. And I said, yeah, I can drive this. And he said, oh, okay, you can, huh? So we arranged to do a little test drive. He gets in the passenger seat. I fire it up, and I drive it away like Mario Andretti. No problem. I mean,
and he's
beginner's luck.
and he's like, how
Yeah,
do you know to do that?
yeah, and again, honestly, beginner's luck for sure. And I did a couple starts okay, and then we get to the stoplight, like the third, and I'm like, lurching and install the car, and I never will forget. My father just looks over and says, "Son, what happened?" I was like, I don't know. I guess I ran out of luck.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
but but bought that little car, and we'd run it up. There's a little mountain outside of the city of Greenville called Paris Mountain, and the guys with the TRs and the MGs, we'd go up there and play race car driver. And of course, didn't know what we were doing. I almost ran off the side of the mountain one day with my buddy, but and that was truly a love and hate relationship. I could relate to all the Lucas jokes, with you know Prince of Darkness and intermittent wipers and
Right.
warm beer. So yeah, that was my first car.
Wow, that's a great story. Yeah, it reminds me of both of my kids started out on BMWs. Lauren, you've never met, but E36, and then Henry's first car was an E30. And he and
Cool.
we flew to Houston and we drove that E30 home. And like you, I don't think he had driven a stick at that point. So, but I stuck him in the driver's seat and I said, okay, let's go. And after that, he went off to some driving schools and people were kind of amazed. It's like, oh, you can drive a manual? And so
Right.
he's like, sure, I can. And so he's only had BMWs. His sister bought a Volkswagen a couple of years ago, and he's like, I'm not working on it. And so he just now bought an E46 back. So we're happy to all
Oh,
be
good.
BMW drivers once again. So, but anyway,
Good.
hey,
Good for you.
yeah, back in your younger days, did you we'll talk about your road trips, but did your family take road trips?
We did, you know, and you know, I can remember everybody loading up in the car and going places and picnicking, and you know, it was always. And looking back on it, Dan, and you're probably the same way. You know, when I was much younger, you take this trip and you thought it was like this journey of a lifetime, and now you realize, oh, it's only a couple hundred miles. You
Right,
know,
right.
it's amazing the way you related time back then as compared to now, and also mileage on a road trip.
Yeah, it sure was. My family had a 65 Plymouth Fury 3, I think it was. Wish we still had that, but
Uh,
that was our road trip car. So, anyway.
right.
So you still do well, obviously you still do road trips. You're on one right now. You're headed from Greenville up to Pittsburgh. So any any road trips though that just stick out in your mind as it's one that you never will forget?
Well, you mentioned one lap of America, and certainly we had some big ones on that. And the first one I did with a couple buddies back in '98, and that was a long one. It started in Watkins Glen, went all the way out to Phoenix, finished up at Watkins Glen, and that one was memorable because I went with two buddies. They kind of talked me into it. The guy that owned the car said, "Well, you guys can do it if Mike does the track stuff." But it was really a special time. It was crazy. I mean, there were a lot of nights we didn't sleep in a hotel. We were driving all night. And then a good buddy of mine, Jim, you know, he passed away a few years ago, and that was something we always talked about. So that was memorable. One that really stands out a lot also, though, is a trip that my wife and I took a number of years ago. This was pre-GPS, and I was training in Germany with BMW and Munich. And after the training, she flew over and met me, and we took the car and drove through Germany into France. We went out to Normandy, and again, this is pre GPS. So I told my wife, I said, "Look, I'm the driver, you're the navigator." You know, so she would be looking at the navigating. I remember a number. Of course, the French are very big on roundabouts, right?
Right. Yep.
And I remember a number of times I'd be going round and round and waiting for her to tell me, and then I'd say, "Okay." Lost in Paris. It was, if we hadn't been so dead tired, it would have been funny. But we went to, it happened at Le Mans practice was during that time. And she's not really into car racing, but she made an agreement. We spend some nights in Paris. I'll go to Le Mans with you. And so we go there, and I had some friends that were racing, and I wanted to see them, but I hadn't made any prior arrangements. It was just, okay, we're going to stop by. So I talked my way into the paddock area, and my wife said, "Come on, we're going into the pits. I want to see these guys." And my wife, last second, said, "No, I'm not going in. They got masks on when they were fueling, you know."
Yep.
And so the guy wasn't looking. I started in the pits. I'm hanging out, and I started looking for some guys I knew walking up pit lane. And the policeman and the gendarme grabbed me by the arm, asked for my credential. Of course, I didn't have one. So my wife is sitting there looking at me horribly when the policeman's escorting me out.
Yep. Right.
Uh, but yeah, it was a great trip. I remember also the thing that frustrates me with my wife is she is a bookworm. So, and it came in handy because she had all this information on these places and all. But I remember we're driving out toward Mont Saint Michel. Have you ever been?
No, I have not.
It is, and to anybody that's listening, if you ever go to that region, which it's all Normandy, Le Mans, Paris, Mont Saint Michel, it's all in the same region. And, you know, the Abbey. And so we're driving down the road. She's reading in this book. And a lot of times we'd be going on and say, "Honey, look at this. Look at that." "Oh, yeah, I'm reading. Let me see it." Yeah, I'd be like, "Look, just look. You're reading the book, you know." And so we're going down. There's this long road that leads out to it. And she says, "I think Mont Saint Michel." I'm like nudging her. "Honey, look." Looking for miles ahead. You could see it. And it was real. There was
Yep.
like some fog. And out of the fog, you could see it. up through the fog. It was real gothic, mystic looking. And finally, I'm like, quit looking in the book and look at the real thing, But that was a rather unique trip. And of course, we'd be going, and she'd be taking a nap sometime, and we'd be humming along. Sometimes the Autobahn 130, and she'd say, "How fast are we going?" I said, "Oh, honey, it's kilometers. I think we're doing 65 miles an hour."
Yeah,
it seems a lot faster.
Yeah, we're barely moving. See, people are going past us. And
Right.
I had the opportunity in '79. I graduated high school that year, and I'd worked every year in the family grocery store. And my brother was serving our country in Nuremberg. So I went over and I spent the summer with him, and we went to the British Grand Prix and the German Grand Prix, and then we went down to Munich to the plant, and that was just about the time, of course, the M1 had come out, and it was sitting there on the floor in the office building when we walked in. So got to see a M1 up close and personal on that trip, and so I got great memories from that trip. My brother had bought a 320. BMW 320, brand new, picked it up, brought it home actually. And so we tooled around on the Autobahn on that. Yeah, we'd be cruising along at 110, 115, and people just be flying by us. So, yeah.
Yeah, and those were cool days. That's when the dollar was like, you could just kill it over there against the mark,
Yeah.
Good times back then for money.
Yeah. So what was your first, since you're a BMW guy now, what was your first BMW?
Yeah, so, a lot of people think, hey, it works for BMW, whatever. But I've been driving them since the mid-'80s, and my first BMW was a 535 E28. I went to lunch with a buddy of mine that had one, and this guy tended to change cars a lot, and I knew he'd had it for a while, and I said, Stevie, what's the deal, man? You've been hanging on with this car. And I remember he looked at me, had this smile. He says, I never get tired of driving this car. And I said, you like it that much, huh? And he says, absolutely. Drive it on the way back from lunch. So I did, and 2 weeks later I had my own, and I've been driving the brand ever since. And of course, been a feel away. That was 85.
Yeah, 85.
85, yeah.
And I assume you kept that car, right? Yeah, right.
Well, I see them every now and then, and would love to have another one.
Yeah, for sure. My brother had one, and I was chatting with my daughter, and we were going through all the BMWs we've owned, and I'd usually end the conversation with, "Yeah, I wish I still had that one. Yeah, I wish I still had that."
Right.
So.
Right.
Anyway, so you talked about you're at the BMW Performance Center. We came down to visit you a couple of years ago now, and man, we just had a blast there with you that day. And you told us a little bit what brought you there. So tell us a little bit about your job, not too much, but a little bit, what you do there on a everyday basis.
Yeah, so the Performance Center where I work, it's the original, and it's based right behind BMW manufacturing there in Greer, South Carolina. And I still instruct a fair amount. I'm really big on variety, but I also handle group, corporate, and special programming. And thankfully, we were very busy prior to the pandemic. We are like record crazy busy now.
Wow.
So I handle that. I also do a lot of, should we say, promotional activities for the brand. For instance, I'm going to the Pittsburg Vintage Grand Prix to be there this weekend to give rides for charity and one of the new M3s. People pay money for the charity, and I give hot lap rides to Shenley Park, which is where they run the vintage race. I go to a number of the IMSA events and give the hot lap rides for the IMSA program. And so we have the Greer facility. We also built a new, it's been 7 years or so now. We have another facility near Palm Springs in Thermal, California. And most recently, we just built a building inside Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, Greenville or Greer, South Carolina, and Thermal, California, those are 7 days a week, year round. the one at Indianapolis will be a little more select dates. But matter of fact, I'll be there first part of August doing some programs. So we're up and running. The building's complete, and I handle programs for all three facilities.
That's great. I took a friend to the 500 this year, and of course, I walked him everywhere. I think we walked about 10 miles. He hadn't been there in like 40 years. I'm like, well, I got to show you the track. So we literally walked every inch of that. And I walked by this building, and I'm like, I don't remember that building. I wonder what that is. And it was shortly after that, I think you posted something on social media. This is our building at the Speedway in Indianapolis. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that building was. Okay. So
yeah, just finished it in May, as a matter of fact. So we're happy to be there. It gives us. I mean, if you want to have your team do a program, that can happen. Again, a lot of corporate. We do a lot of special training. We trained the Presidential Helicopter Squadron once. We've had Secret Service guys. We've had CIA, you name it. But we do all types of group programs, and with Indy, that just adds something else. It's really cool to be able to drive an M car around the Indianapolis road course. If you want to drive the M4 GT4 race car, we can arrange that out at our facility in Palm Springs. So
yeah.
We have a lot to offer if you like to drive.
Yeah, that's for sure. So what do you find the most fun about your job? Because, a guy like me, I'm looking at it going, wow, Mike must just get up every day and go, I have to go to work today.
Yeah, so there are a lot of aspects to the enjoyment. I've always enjoyed seeing other people enjoy what's been such a big part of my life. When we're doing the schools, seeing people enjoying it, if it's truly a school, seeing them get better, enjoy the cars. People are always blown away by the cars. When I do the hot lap programs at the IMSA events, we're running around Daytona or Sebring or Road Atlanta, I always really enjoy people being exposed to the capability of the car. And they're always, and I still am, honestly, the cars are unbelievable. You talk about the good old days. If you're into cars, they've never been more efficient. They've never been faster. They've never been safer. These are the good old days. So I enjoy the sharing of the cars and the driving. I've enjoyed the opportunities I've had to drive so many different cars and meet so many people all over the world. I mean, the people I've met through the years, it's just been fascinating, the different personalities and the different lines of work that I've been exposed to I wouldn't have normally. So it's really multifaceted as far as the things I enjoy.
Yeah, the BMWs today, is there one that just jumps out at you and says, yeah, that's the car I want to drive today? Maybe a favorite that's in the fleet today, we'll say.
For me, what's my favorite?
Yeah.
I need to come up with an answer because I get that question a lot.
I'm sure.
It's really hard for me to pick just one. I tend to favor the M line. I'll say that to begin with. Having said that, I've never disliked our X models. I've always thought they were really good, but they've made them so good now. I truly enjoy driving those as well. They're still very dynamic as far as the driving. Obviously, a lot of versatility. But some of the standouts for me, the M5, M3, M4, are just, they're amazing. Like, for instance, the new M3, M4, and I'm in a new M3 now. You take this car to a track and you run it. It is mind-blowing capable. But yet, I'm driving to Pittsburgh and it's not killing me.
Yeah,
Exactly. It's comfortable. I put the shocks on comfort mode, which is not cushy ride. It's still sporty handling. But, the car, an M3 is a real performance car you can live in, or an M5 comfortably every day, take it to the track and ring it out, and it will challenge you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my brother's had a few of those over the years, and so, I can appreciate that. But
they're amazing.
You did the M2 once in one lap, didn't you? Best I recall.
I did. I did, yeah. That's and again, not to leave that off the list because certainly it's near and dear to the heart. It's truly a driver's car, and one other thing I really enjoy about my job is the anticipation. We're always, and I've always thought kind of my personality to some degree is maybe I'm never satisfied. I mean, I love the cars now, but I'm always looking what's the next thing, and the next thing we have the new M240, but really anticipating the new M2. The previous one was a huge success for BMW. If you're a driver, it is just an incredible fun car and fast car to drive. And the new M2 is not going to disappoint. So we're looking forward to having that one in our fleet.
That's great. So here's a question for you. You've obviously been on a lot of road trips with a lot of people, and if you could go on a road trip today with a person who's no longer with us, they're still around, but if you could go on a trip with dead or alive person, who would you go with?
Well, not to be too sentimental, but I would love to take. I've traveled a lot, and I've been out west, but I haven't really done. I mean, I went one lap. We're out in Colorado, whatever.
Sure.
But I would like to do like Montana, more of Colorado, Wyoming, and I'd like to take my dad along.
Yep. I had the.
And I think for a lot of reasons. My father, wasn't around to see GPS or how obviously the cars, everything's changed since then. But it would be really interesting to for him to experience some of the new technology, but to have him along for the ride.
Yeah, I didn't have the technology back then, and I appreciate that because I'll share. In 2003, I bought a 1983 320 in San Jose, California, with only one purpose. That was to fly out there and drive it back home on Route 50 through California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and then I had enough of that, so we jumped on the interstate. But I called my dad, who was a retired owner-operator of a big truck, and I'm like, well, who am I going to invite? I got to invite him. So he went along, and we drove that little car all the way back. We looked at it, and we're like, and by the way, I only paid $2,500 for this car, but it was in great shape. And my dad looked at the tires. He goes, well, we could use some tires, but we couldn't find any anywhere. He goes, we'll be fine. And so we headed across. So if you've never done that Route 50 through there, I would highly encourage that. So I appreciate the dad comment because I did get to do that. And he talked about that trip for years. Even after he had Alzheimer's, he'd talk about that trip to California. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, that's cool you got to do that. I tell you, I had a lot of faith to take a $2,500 car and just go for it.
Yeah, well, I figure I got a truck driver. We'll be okay.
That's cool.
Well, so you talked about you've been a lot of places, you've traveled a lot, you've driven a lot of cars. Is there anything on your bucket list that just jumps out at you that I got to do this before my days are over?
Well, there's a couple things I think about. If we're talking about the driving side, right? We're still into the.
Yeah, we're driving. Yeah.
Yeah, cars. Yeah. So, a number of years ago when I was racing, kind of in my mind, and I never really had anything close to putting it together, but I always thought it'd be really cool to race Le Mans. And I've been to Le Mans, but I've never. And I know you can drive, a lot of the roads, but I've always wanted to do like some hot lapping at Le Mans. And a matter of fact, I gave the head of FIA a hot lap ride at where was it? Just Petit Le Mans, and last year. And so then I saw him at Sebring, and I said, look, I'd like to do some laps at Le Mans. He says, I could make that happen. So maybe that's in the work. Maybe that's in the works for me. The other thing is, and I've been to Monaco, and I've driven around it in a car, and I've walked it, and I don't think there's any way to ever make this happen. But I would like to hot lap Monaco. I don't think that's going to happen. But,
Yeah. Well, who knows?
um,
Who knows? Maybe
yeah.
BMW will get you over there somehow, right?
So that's kind of a bucket list thing I've thought about.
That would be a good bucket list. So,
Yeah.
well, anyway, well, I've appreciated our time. I don't know where this little project's going. Talked to a great friend of ours yesterday, Lance White, who you know, and
Yeah,
so
great guy.
just trying to link up with car people, and if you know anybody that wants to chat about cars and road trips and things like that, you can let me know. But I just usually wrap it up here saying, well, Mike, I think everybody ought to go down and experience the at least what we did down there at the school. But tell the people who are listening here how to find you or how to find the Performance Center, whatever you want to tell them to find, and hopefully maybe somebody will show up there and they'll go, hey, I heard you and Dan talking.
Yeah, that would be great to have people come down and drive with us, and I absolutely guarantee you that they'll have a great time. If you're interested in just kind of signing up, doing an individual program, of course, you can go to our website, bmwperformancecenter.com. If you're interested in getting some buddies together, maybe going out to Thermal, driving the race cars, or maybe you have a corporate group and want to put something together, I'm on Facebook, or of course my email. It's a little convoluted, but here we go. It's Michael, Michael .Renner, RENNER at BMW MC, as in Manufacturing Corporation, EXT.com.
All right. I'll make sure that's in the show notes and people can find you, because I really believe that's a great experience to come down there. So.
Well, I appreciate it. And, all our areas, they have side attractions. You come to Greenville, stay downtown. It's fantastic. You go to Palm Springs, you have Palm Springs. And then you go to Indy, you've got, what more can you say other than Indy? Maybe go to St. Elmo's Steakhouse for a good dinner.
Yeah, that's right. This is ad-free, Mike, so you can't be advertising for other people. No, I'm kidding. All right. Well, hey, I thank you, my friend. I hope you're safe on your journey there, and have a good time in Pittsburgh.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it, and always it's good talking to you. Yep. Stay in touch, and I do hope to see you soon.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dan the Road Trip Guy, and we look forward to having you back again next time. In the meantime, if you want to find me, you can find me on the internet at Danny, D-A-N-N-Y, Neal, Neal.com. Until we meet up again, keep having conversations and keep driving.